Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on the HAS Consultant Framework with a particular focus on CENELEC. Okay. My name is Karolina Krzystek-Derantyr, and I will be your moderator today. I look after the technical boards and the technical policy here at the CENELEC Management Center. And your speakers today are Alexandre Beltrão and Geert Maas, who are in charge of the digital production and electrotechnology and industry, and they will be presenting the slides to you today. You are all muted, but you are welcome to use the questions and answers panel to submit your questions. You can submit them as we go, so you don't have to wait until the end of this webinar. We will take about 25 minutes to go through the slides we prepared for you. After the 25 minutes, we'll stop for a minute, we'll look at the questions, and we will resume with giving answers to your questions. You will also receive a recording of this webinar and the questions replied to in writing after this webinar closes, and we will upload this recording and the questions and answers to our website, the CENELEC website. So I'll give the floor to Alexandre and Geert, who will walk you through the slides prepared for today.
Thank you, Carolina. Good morning, Geert Maas speaking. We will walk you through the slides. Effectively, it will not be necessarily a walk in the park, but a walk through the HAS Consultant Framework. So, first of all, what will we be talking about? We will be talking about the assessments, the meetings, and the tasks and the people involved in this system. Let me please first show you this slide pointing out the relationships for a joint assessment. As you may be aware, before, under the old system of consultants, CENELEC had a contract with new approach consultants that were paid for by the Commission and that CENELEC managed. And this has now changed into a different system where the Commission has entered into a contract with a HAS contractor who will hire the consultants, where the Commission and CENELEC try to find common understandings on the exchange of documents and the interpretation of the process, where CENELEC and the HAS contractor will have to interact on an operational and organizational level, subject to control by the Commission here, because the contractual arrangements. And the technical bodies, last but not least, the most important part, the technical bodies will have to interact with the consultants and develop a working relationship through the assessments and the meetings. So, who is this now? This HAS contractor, that is Ernst & Young, and Ernst & Young is the coordinator working on behalf of the Commission with three main tasks. First of all, administrative and logistical, with the recruitment of the consultants, coordinate their tasks, assign the work, organize their work program. They also need to apply some horizontal checks of non-technical nature. For example, is the Annex ZZ there? Is there a proper identification of the standardization request and the essential requirements aimed to be covered, etc., etc. And as a third task, they will need to perform with the Commission, that is within their contract, an assessment of the effectiveness of the assessment concept in order to propose improvements. The contractor will be managing a pool of harmonized standards consultants called the HAS consultants, on which they decide to which sectors they are assigned and which work they will be assigned to. And on their tasks, Alexandre, you can now tell us a little bit more.
Yes, good morning. So the HAS consultants are independent experts selected and hired and managed by the HAS contractor. So this task of managing the consultants was done before by CCMC. So the consultants still have the same tasks as before. So the compliance assessment, so the analysis of the drafts from the ESOs, and the task of communication with the technical bodies through meetings. So what needs to happen for these work items to be assessed? So the work items have to be linked to the relevant legislation and standardization request, and this has to be expressed in the database, in the CENELEC database. So this is extremely important that we know what should be assessed, so we can trigger the assessments automatically. And it's also important that these work items, these lists are approved by the European Commission where relevant. So very important, the technical body has to keep the work program up to date. So here we can see the indicative flowchart that was taken from the tender launched by the European Commission to hire the HAS contractor. Here in the box 2A, we see that the scope of this contract is only for the work program, for the registered work program and installation request. And we also see that there are 4 specific stages where the assessment can take place. So 2B, the drafting stage, 2C, the inquiry stage, 2D, the formal vote stage, and then finally an exceptional stage after the standard is already published. And we also see that the contractor has the task of making these horizontal verifications, and the HAS consultant, here in red, they have the 2 tasks as described before, the compliance assessment, task 10, and the communication, task 20, which includes the meetings. So here we have a sum up of when the assessments can take place, the 4 stages. And the duration of these assessments should normally be 5 weeks after notification to the HAS contractor. So now I'll give the floor back to Gerd so he can tell us everything about the outcome of the assessments.
Yeah, so thank you, Alexandre. So a first change to the old system is that the outcome of the assessments is no longer only negative or positive. There is an intermediate stage which is called partial compliance for those standards presenting minor deficiencies in the eyes of the Commission that could probably be cited with a notice in the official journal. So this is a stage in between, and this is an attempt of the Commission to be a little bit more diligent when dealing with standards. Then there is also something else, the review. So when an assessment, when there is a disagreement of the technical body with the assessment result, we can challenge the assessment and ask for a review. So therefore we need a justification that is as specific as possible and is related to the work item. And this challenge can relate to all kinds of dodgy interpretations of guidance that have not been agreed upon, some debatable interpretations of essential requirements, or the assessments, the consultants interfering with the consensus building in a way which goes beyond the normal assessment tasks, or even, in some cases, deviation from sector-specific arrangements that have been validated with the Commission before, so that, of course, are predominant on the assessment result. Now, to ask for such a review or to challenge an assessment, this decision must be supported by a consultation of CCMC, relevant sector fora, etc., because in certain cases it could be a horizontal issue, and then we have to tackle it in a horizontal way also. The time for review is normally 3 weeks after notification to the HAS contractor, so they have to come back with a report. weeks. And it is the technical body secretary that can request a review to the CCMC project manager, who will then take it further. Now we have talked about normally 5 weeks and normally 3 weeks when we receive the assessments. Now, Alexandre, you can tell us what we did to get the assessments and where to find them.
Yes. So for the exchange of documents between the CENELEC and the HAS contractor, we will be using the CEN Live platform. So we'll put the assessments here, and then the request here, and then we receive the assessments, and then CCMC will send these assessments to the relevant secretaries. Well, as it is a CEN tool by default, the CENELEC secretary does not have access to this platform, but if requested, we can arrange that. So there is this possibility, if you want to directly access this tool, and if you want to set your notifications in the folder that every time something is uploaded, you automatically receive this information. This is possible. Just contact us that we can arrange this. So now going through the 4 stages where the assessments can take place one by one. We'll start by the drafting stage, which is indicative. So it's the circulation of the first working draft, the stage 2060. So the TC secretary just needs to send us this draft, the first draft. We're using the transmission notice as normal, sending us by email. And if the secretary wants to have an assessment at this stage, he just has to indicate it in the comments and to send other relevant elements that may be needed as the Annex ZZ. In the case of parallel work, we'll need to have the CD text, and then the CENELEC secretary will add all other relevant elements, as for instance the risk assessment. Then what will happen is that when we receive the result, we'll put it on live link and we'll notify the secretary.
Alexandre, if I may, a short intervention, because I realize that not all technical body officers might already be informed. CENELEC BT has approved a day-to-day management procedure for the Frankfurt Agreement, under which you will have access to all the CD text, CDV text, etc., and we invite you to contact your permanent delegate for more information, pending that we make all this available on the CENELEC BOS. I'm sorry for the interruption.
Thank you for the additional information at this point. So, and then at this point, the outcome, even if it is negative, does not stop the process. It has to be considered, of course. And of course, there is a possibility to call a meeting with the consultant if there is something to clarify. Then we have the inquiry stage. So the secretary will send the draft for homegrown as usual. If it is, if we're talking about parallel work with the IC lead, this will be automatically triggered. So CCMC will send the assessment. Will request the assessment when triggered when we are triggered by IC. But of course, the CENELEC TC may want or may need to send us the additional documents necessary for the assessment to be added to this draft. So, and again, we are talking about these elements like the Annex ZZ. And once again, when we receive the assessment result, we put it on the Live Link platform and we inform the secretary. So at this point, the outcome is important. If it is compliant and if all other criteria are met, there is the possibility to skip the formal vote. If not, the formal vote cannot be skipped, and we have to deal with the comments. Okay, the inquiry is not delayed, but we will try to solve the problem at this point. And there is a possibility that with the Common Resolution meeting, we have this empowered pre-publication TC meeting, which is a way of jointly with the consultant and the Commission to solve the negative assessment at this point before we go to formal vote. Well, if it is not possible, then we have to decide what to do. And for the TC can decide that this standard is not harmonized anymore, or we can consult BT for a different solution. And now I give the floor back to Gert, and we will talk about the formal vote stage.
Yes, thank you, Alessandro. So at the formal vote stage, we have a major change for which we still have to need a last BT approval that is running, but that will be solved by the beginning of July, we expect and hope. That is to start the assessments prior to the formal vote, especially for homegrown. For the parallel work, the trigger is the approval to go to the FDIS, and this will then trigger the assessment process. Again, for homegrown work, and A11 is homegrown, I remind you, the TCS Secretary is to submit to CCMC the documents in accordance to the process as documented in the CENELEC BOS, with the transmission notice, etc., etc., and these events will then automatically trigger the assessment. Therefore, it is again very important that the work item is correctly identified in the work program so that we know it's harmonized and intended to be cited in the official journal. The European TC, CENELEC TC, will need to ensure the availability of these very specific European elements, like at inquiry, Annex ZZ, and the Annex ZA. You will have to consider whether you need common modifications or not. Preferably not. Preferably everything has been done at IEC level for parallel work. The transmission notice for the homegrown part shall mention the relevant documentation that you wish to submit to support the assessment. So the risk assessment, for instance, LVD, CENELEC Guide 32, or the justification of the use of normative references if there are undated ones, or the identification of normative references relevant for the intended presumption of conformity. So those references that are in the path of presumption of conformity and that are important for the assessment. And again, the assessment report will be made available on the live link and supplied to you, to the technical body, by email, because this is a send tool that we use for technological reasons. Now, also here, the outcome of the assessment is important. It speaks for itself that when the outcome is positive, nothing has to be done and we can just proceed. However, and that is now the advantage of having the assessment prior to formal vote, when we have a result of partial compliance or lack of compliance, we can do something. So, when we get this notification, we directly have to inform the TC Secretariat and the permanent delegate of the National Committee holding the Secretariat that there is an issue, and we can suspend the vote on the homegrown work or the homegrown parts for maximum 12 weeks in order to try to resolve issues and to decide whether we will challenge the assessment or not, etc., etc. However, it's important to know that we always will have to inform the BT about what's happening, and if you want to delay further, consult BT on the way forward. This means that if within 7 weeks after the reception of the original assessment we have no news from the technical body, the relevant permanent delegate will be triggered for a proposal to BT within a week, so that 4 weeks later we have an outcome and we know where to go. Parallel work, of course we cannot stop the parallel procedures, so the parallel procedures on the formal vote on the international text will run, not modified. However, the start of the vote on common modifications and European elements can be suspended for maximum 12 weeks under the same scenario as just explained, because these can be dealt with as homegrown elements. Then finally, we have an assessment after formal vote, which is should be an exceptional process that in certain cases we need to deal with situations that have not been assessed before, or where we want to add an Annex ZZ to a standard because it was missing, etc., etc. So then we have to pack everything together. The technical body secretary has to request this to CCMC. We will then submit it to Ernst & Young. Again, if the outcome is à côté de la plaque, we can still challenge it, like mentioned before. And then we have two situations. If the standard has already been made available and we have technical modifications that are necessary to allow citation in the official journal, the technical body can consider appropriate actions applying certain possibilities BT has created. We can consult BT on the matter, who will then agree or disagree with the proposed way forward. If the standard is not yet been made available, we directly inform BT of the need to suspend the process of ratification or making available, and this for a period of maximum 17 weeks, in which we can undertake several actions. 17 weeks, because if you time all these actions, we come to this delay. All these possibilities will be detailed on the CENELEC BOS. Of course, there is quite some work to be done to further inform you. If in the meantime you have questions on this, also back to your permanent delegate and back to CCMC for information. Hot topic, meetings. Alexandre.
Yes. So the process to request meetings with the HAS consultant is simple. It should be requested by the TC secretary using the template provided by Ernst & Young. So this template will be available on the CENELEC BOS, and it should be sent to this generic email address. So the meeting request can be for technical body meetings, TC or working groups. It can be for international meetings, IC meetings, or for meetings where a specific harmonized work item is going to be discussed. Preference should be given to remote participation, and of course you should plan in advance when you want to have meetings to give some time to Ernst & Young to reply to you.
Yeah. And to try to put the topics a little bit together. Yeah. Okay, sorry.
For sectorial meetings, you should check first with CCMC, as CCMC will make this coordination. And here we have the template that you should use, and I'll give back the floor to Gert.
Yes, so the template will be made available on the BOS. A lot of work on the BOS management team to be performed. So now, in which areas will the consultants work? You have on screen the areas covered and as identified in the document between the Commission and Ernst & Young, and as reported by the Commission to CENELEC on the 25th of May. So all these areas on screen are covered. There were still some vacancies in eco-design, which could be of particular interest to CENELEC TCs, because it's a bit there are many items there, and transport of dangerous goods less important. There is no HAS consultant for packaging and packaging waste, because there is no activity in that area. Now, these areas covered can be extended by the Commission if new areas would pop up. So this is not carved in stone, and it could evolve over time. Who will be doing this? This is purely informative. We have also been informed by the Commission of this list of people on screen that have been selected by Ernst & Young and have a contract with Ernst & Young. The white fields are those that already worked as new approach consultants and have a certain experience in the matter. The yellow fields are those that are completely new. Again, and then in the lifts area, there are also some people that will start under the machinery directive. So again, the selection and management of the consultants, the organization of work, the assignment of work items to a consultant, etc., is strictly in the hands of Ernst & Young. We may not like it, and we understand that there may sometimes be some difficult situations, but it's something that we really cannot directly influence. All of this has a price, and there is a lot of work on the plate of the TC Secretariat, the Secretary and the reporting secretariats, because to make everything work, we have to play a more active role in the follow-up of the parallel work. And this, again, as I mentioned earlier, is made possible under the Frankfurt Agreement through the day-to-day management, for which we will communicate very soon. So we need to ensure a very early follow-up of work items that are started at IEC. We need to see whether they fit in the work program, whether they need to be under standardization requests. We might need to activate European experts in IEC or in certain working groups, even CENELEC TC exists, to deal with specific matters, such as the drafting of the annexes Z, so ZA and ZZ. Please be reminded that the annexes ZZ is a finality. There is some work to be done prior to that in order to identify which clauses cover which essential requirements or safety objectives. This also relates to the fact that we will have to provide new elements, the risk analysis, and a well-known example is the risk analysis that the old consultants requested as per CENELEC Guide 32 for the LVD. Any other justification we might want to give for how the standard is addressing the essential requirements. The use of normative references. If we use undated normative references, why? If they are in line with internal regulations part 3, that is then possible, but then we have to justify why we use them. The Secretariat has to also deal with some specific problems, classes and thresholds, which is something typically CPR, but which might be of particular interest to, for instance, DCs dealing with cables. EMC performance criteria, statistical rules like 8080, horizontal issues that we find back in different families of standards that we all need to deal with. The Secretary will also be confronted with dealing with the assessment results with the Commons Resolution Meeting, or CRM, possibly to be organized as an empowered pre-publication TC meeting after inquiry in order to deal with assessment outcome together with the consultants and to ensure that the result and the new draft deals with all the comments and will get then positively assessed at formal vote. add formal vote, maybe organize a last call meeting if necessary. And all this implementing the Frankfurt Agreement and the day-to-day management, avoiding common modifications, etc., etc. I don't need to make a little drawing. You know that it is very challenging for all of us. So, we now have come, I think, to the end of the slides. We have some key learning points, and Alexandre, I think you're best placed to remind everything on what we learned today.
Thank you. So the first key learning point is that the TCs have to manage their work program. So this has to be updated in the CENELEC database, and the work programs of the standardization requests that are sent to the European Commission have to be updated as well. So without this, the assessments will not take place. So I'll use this point to reply to the CENELEC TC 62 meeting in Budapest. Hello, good morning. I think that the solution for a problem is exactly here, that you have to inform the European Commission that we are developing this work, this amount of work, so they can foresee with their contractor how they are going to deal with the assessments in the future, and how they are going to make sure that they have enough resources for this work to come. So if the European Commission is aware that this high volume is expected, they have to deal with this with their contractor. So, and then it will be, up to Ernst & Young to manage the resources they have available to make sure that they can do all these assessments, all this work to be received. So the second key learning point is that as soon as possible, you should start developing the necessary elements for the assessments, the Annex ZA, the risk assessment, the normative references, everything has to be developed as soon as possible. Then the third key learning point is that there are 4 specific phases for the assessments: the drafting stage, before inquiry, before formal vote, and then exceptionally on a voted standard. If we have negative assessments, we have this new possibility of having these meetings where jointly this is discussed with the consultant and eventually with the commission, if the problem is more serious, let's say like this. And then finally, the last key learning point is that CCMC and the permanent delegates are here to help you whenever you need. Thank you.